Well, I heard you say if you want to test. We wanted to stop, and we would have at 600, but it moved on right up to 1,000, and we capped it before it went any higher.
And again, I want to just re-emphasize that the other tests for certification still have to be done. These toilets still have to meet all the exact same certification requirements regardless of how well they do in the MAP. Nobody says if you do 1,000, you only have to have half the drain line carry. So I think this whole discussion was supposed to be about the evolution of rating toilets, and I think there needs to be the two ratings that we currently have, or something similar to that. And that's the same as we have in, say, an educational system, where one rating is, did you pass the course or fail the course? And that's what a certification is. Are you eligible to practice your profession or whatever? Did you pass high school, university, whatever? But the other rating is, what mark did you get? Did you get an 89 or a 95? And somebody might say, do you need an engineer that gets 100% on every test? No, you don't. So maybe that's an unrealistic test. So maybe we shouldn't have marks that go up to 100% in engineering or whatever. But we do, because somebody might say, to me, that is an important element. I want the best. I want the best, even if I don't need it, I want that. So I think we still need both criteria, a pass-fail, which is the WaterSense, and something akin to the MAP testing that allows the consumer to decide on their own what type of model they want.
Another question?
I couldn't help but take this mic here and make a few comments. I'm Shiv Manjanathaya, American Standard. A couple of things came to mind during this discussion here. I don't think we test toilets to 1,000 grams because that's humanly possible. It's more to determine the probability of failure at 350 grams. I think everyone realizes in high volume manufacture there's variation. The second toilet that comes out of the conveyor is not the same as the first one. A year later in the manufacturing line, you can't expect to have the exact same performance that you did on the first one that got certified at 1,000 grams. So the point that we want to make here is basically that there's a probability density function associated with any event. And that distribution tends to follow an exponential distribution. And when you look at even a small percentage, like 0.5% change at 1,000 grams, let's say, that amounts to perhaps 20 calls, service calls for a residential type unit. So what we're essentially doing by testing products at 1,000 grams doesn't mean that it's humanly possible. It's more to reduce the chance of a toilet clogging. How many times would any of you want to have your toilet clogged? For me, it's none. So I would obviously pick something that's 1,000 grams just because of the probability of it failing at 350 grams. That's the overall point of being able to go higher. But the second point that is being mentioned as there is other characteristics that are important, I totally agree. There are other parameters that are equally important that need to be added, which I think are done today through the ASME testing. But these ASME testing criteria have been out there for a while and I think are outdated, to be frank. So they may need to catch up to the real world as far as the high efficiency toilets and performance is expected from the population. So our take is more, again, not on going to 1,000 gram just because it's humanly possible. It's more the probability associated with a chaotic event like a flush. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I would agree. And you made a point about the variability in the manufacturing process, because after all, the way these products are made doesn't guarantee that every 1,000 gram rated toilet is going to end up on the shelf at 1,000. There is a bell curve. Now, somebody mentioned about, and I think it was you, CJ, about what happens 2 years later, 3 years later. We do have an audit program in place that hasn't been, we haven't had the necessity to go out and aggressively pursue it, but it is a program in place to go out and audit at retail products that we've received complaints about. This product does not perform as you suggest, and we can go out and pull those products off the shelf and retest them and deal with it at that time if in fact these products are not the same as what was originally tested. We know that products submitted for testing, and by the way, most of the testing is done by IAPMO at the lab you probably visited last evening, or one of IAPMO's recognized laboratories. But we know that products are cherry-picked for the testing. I mean, that goes without saying, not for everybody, but for a number of the manufacturers. So if a product is tested at 1,000, I have no doubt at all that if we went out and pulled 5 or 6 of those off the shelf a year later, they might be testing at 800. We don't know, but the key is that they do exceed the threshold that we believe and have found to be the minimum performance threshold of 350, which covers 99%, the 99th percentile. So there are mechanisms in place. They aren't all fully implemented, but we do try and track this beyond just the day the product is tested and do something follow on to that.
If I could just follow on to what John said, for the WaterSense program, the toilets are initially tested and the samples are chosen by the certifying body and not necessarily by the manufacturer. So that's one way we just sort of ensure the performance and that we're not getting sort of specially made toilets for the testing for WaterSense. The other thing is that the WaterSense certification scheme requires that the certifying body go back periodically and do annual testing on a certain percentage of the manufacturer's product line, and then they have to do retesting of almost everything that's listed within 5 years, and they can pull those products from the retailer, from a project site or wherever. So there is a lot of auditing built into the system, and if we did get a lot of complaints from a utility about toilets that were a part of a rebate program, we would be able to go back to the certifier of those toilets and say, we've had this problem, and then they could go back and have a conversation with the manufacturer and see if there is actually a problem with those toilets in the field.
Thanks.
Can I jump
We
in
do have
real
another
quick?
presentation going. Did someone else want to make a comment there?
Just real quick, I wanted
Sure.
to say that I think the use of MAP, you talk about from a probability standpoint to ensure that you're creating an entire group of products that are going to meet the requirements, I think is a very good use of the test internally. I mean, it's like I said, that's how we do it from a QC standpoint. I do think the challenge is always what is the consumer, how is it being communicated with the consumer, and how are they using that information to make choices, and are they fully informed? And I think that's, again, that's a challenge for all of us as manufacturers and as marketers, is to make sure that they understand what 10 means and what 8 means and what 5 stars means.
That's a very good point, Rob, because what we've found is that where Home Depot uses the MAP scores at their point of purchase displays, more often than not, people will think that 1,000 or 10 in that case is twice as good as a 5 or 500. And that's not true. So, not necessarily true. So there's a lot of education that's needed, and I'm hoping that the manufacturers working with us, with Bill and me and others, can begin to educate consumers in some fashion as to what these numbers mean and what they don't mean. So hopefully, as usual, education becomes a big part of the solution.
Now, Russ has given us a reprieve of another 5 minutes or so, so if we do have other questions, we have a question over here. If we can get a microphone. Maria is sprinting now.
Where am I going?
John Karras from Coroma. I have actually 2 questions. The first one is that this is really the first time that I've heard as many comments about MAP testing from all the manufacturers, and I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great debate. A lot of different opinions. Where does it go from here? Is there a forum that's going to be, created to further debate this, or is it just something that's an ongoing process as we go through IAPMO meetings and PMI meetings, so on and so forth?